everyone, I am CA Vibhuti Narang. Welcome to our channel Voxcop Academy. In today's video, I will be discussing about a topic which is TDS Challan cum returns which needs to be filed through the new income tax video. Although we have already discussed what is TDS Challan and what are TDS returns, the challans are the payment challan which needs to be filed through Challan 281. I have a separate video for TDS Challan filing through new income tax portal whose link I'll provide in the description box. Also, the filing of returns under Form 26Q, 26, 27EQ or 24Q. These also I have earlier discussed at how to file these returns. Those links also I'll provide in the description box. But today's topic is a very different topic because we will be understanding that under section 194 of the Income Tax Act, there are few sections in which we do not require to file a different challan and a different return for a particular deduction being made. So only one challan cum return which acts as well as a payment performa invoice as well as a return mechanism in which we are providing the deductor as well as the deductee details. Also, one benefit of this challan cum return for this section is that you do not require the tax deduction account number, which is your TAN number. Now, I have already talked about these sections in my earlier videos as and when they were made applicable by the government. But as we are talking separately about this topic today, so I will be just briefly touching upon these sections and then I'll be proceeding that how to file these type of forms on the new income tax portal. So first let us understand what these four sections are. The first is 194IA, which is TDS on payment of transfer of immovable property. The form number for this section is 26QB. The certificate number is form 16B. The next section is 194IB, which is TDS on rent on property. The form number is 26QC and the certificate number is form 16C. Next section is 194M, which is TDS on payment to resident contractors and professionals. Its form is 26QD and certificate number is 16D. Next is section 194S, which is very newly introduced, that is TDS on transfer of virtual digital assets. Its form number is 26QB and its certificate number is form 16E. For all the four sections, the due date is common, which is 30 days from the end of the month in which TDS is deducted. For example, I am supposed to make the TDS deduction on 20th of February. So my due date to fill this challan cum return will be 30 from the end of this month, that is 30th of March. So due date for filing these challan cum returns is always common in four sections. Now we will understand a brief introduction what these sections were actually. 194A was payment on transfer of certain immovable property other than agricultural land. So deductee in this case is a resident transfer and deductor is any purchaser. The threshold limit for a single transaction was 50 lakh. Rate of TDS was 1% and if TDS PAN was not provided of the deductee, then the rate of TDS was 20%. The next section was 194IB, which is payment of rent by certain individuals or HUF. Deductee was a resident and deductor was any individual or HUF other than those covered under section 194I. The rent threshold per month limit was 50,000 and the rate of TDS was 5%. Next section was 194M, which is TDS on payment to resident contracts and professionals. Again, deductee is a resident, but deductor is any individual other than those covered under 194C, 194H and 194J, that is contract, brokerage and professional. Threshold limit was 50 lakh per annum and the rate of TDS was 5%. Next was TDS on transfer of virtual digital assets. In this case, the deductee is a resident, but deductor are of two types. One, whose turnover is more than 1 crore and gross receipts more than 50 lakh, and second one were the specified persons whose turnover was less than 1 crore and gross receipts were less than 50 lakh. The threshold limit for the first case was 10,000 per annum and in case of specified person was 50,000 per annum. Rate of TDS was 1%. Now we will understand how to file this form on the government portal. Starting with the first form, which is form 26QB, we need to go to the new income tax portal, which is incometax.gov.in. You need to log in through your PAN credentials. After login through the PAN credentials, you need to e-file, and under e-file click on e-pay tax. Under e-pay tax, you need to go to e-payment on the right hand side. Under e-payment, you will actually get all those four forms, which is 26QB, QC, QD and QE. Now what will happen in this case is, first we'll go with 26QB. The earlier steps which I have discussed are common for all the four forms. So what I'll do in the next three forms, I'll be starting from this portion itself. Now first you have to go to there are four tabs in all the four forms. In the first form, as this is the sale of immovable property, so earlier in the earlier portal or the earlier Challan return filing mechanism was that you need to enter the buyer as well as the seller details. But right now these facility has been e-payment, or the tax payment facility is being inbuilt through the logins itself. So what happens is, as you are liable to deduct, you are the deductor. So deductor details are always being auto populated in the system. So as the buyer, you do not have to fill any details. These details are auto populated. All the gray area you can see, it means that these are being auto populated through the system and you cannot change the data. One thing which you need to select at the bottom is whether more than one buyer or not. So in this case, if there are more than one buyer, if it is the answer is yes, then you have to fill the form for the second buyer as well. But if the answer is no, then you have to continue. After clicking on continue, you have to give the seller details. Now whether the seller is a resident or non-resident, this is asked on every page. So if the seller is a resident, then you have to provide its PAN. You have to re-enter the seller PAN. After re-entering the seller PAN, the Aadhaar number will be auto-populated. The name of the seller and the category of PAN. Now category of PAN is the fourth digit or fourth letter of your PAN number, which defines whether it is a company, whether it's a firm, whether it's an individual proprietor. So based on that, whether it's a trust, HUF, any kind of a category is being auto populated based on the seller's PAN. Then you need to provide the address details of the seller. After providing the address details, it asks you at the end whether there are more than one seller or not. So if it is yes, then you have to fill the form for that seller also. If the answer is no, then you have to click on continue. After clicking on continue, then you have the page of the transfer property details, which means that you need to enter the details of that property which was supposed to be purchased by you as a buyer. So you need to give the residential status of the seller. In residential status, again this is this is available in all the forms. Now you have to select the type of property. The type of property is whether it is land or a building. Then after selecting whether it's a land or building, then you have to provide the property details. All these details, earlier was the seller address. This is the actual property which you have purchased, the details of those property. Then you have to provide the date of agreement for sale of property. That is the date on which the agreement for sale was being made. What is the total value of the property? The date on which the payment was made to the seller and the date on which the actual TDS reduction was done. So ideally these two dates should be same. If there is any difference, there are chances of interest being made applicable. Whether the payment type is lump sum or installment. So being in high value transaction, it may or may not be possible that a lump sum or a one shot payment is being done. So if it is not that case, then if you have the installment cases, then at every installment you are ideally supposed to fill this form. You need to select that option payment type. Then you need to provide the total amount paid or credited to the seller, that is the amount on which TDS was supposed to be deducted. What is the TDS amount? So your basic tax get auto populated. The TDS amount here gives notification or a warning that if the seller PAN is inoperative, that is, it is not being linked to Aadhaar, then the TDS at the rate 20%, that is the higher 206AA section will be made applicable. If this is auto-populated, whether any interest or any other fees is applicable, then you have to click on continue. After clicking on continue, you need to add the payment details. In the payment details, it is normal you have different kinds of options. Based on the option you are selecting, it will be diverting you to the page relevant to the option selected. Once you have made the payment, you click the on continue. You process the payment as per your selection medium. Then a 26QB form is being generated. So this was how the 26QB form was made applicable. Now talking about 26QC. 26QC till new payment everything again is same. Now when we click on this form 26QB, we proceed. We as a tenant, our details will be again populated, auto populated, whether there are more than one tenant or not. So answer will be either yes or no. Accordingly you will continue. Landlord details we need to enter. So we need to enter whether the landlord PAN, again re-enter the landlord PAN. The Aadhaar number as discussed will be auto populated. Then the name of the landlord and all these basic details either need to be filled or it will be auto populated. In the end, it will ask whether more than one landlord or not. So whether yes or no. Accordingly, it will be go to continue. After continuing, you have to add the property rented details. So whether the property was a land, building or both, then you have to fill the property details on which the rent was being taken. The period of tenancy is the number of months the property was held on rent. The total value of rent paid is the rent per month into the period of tenancy. So if in my case the rent per month is 60,000 and for 10 months it was on rent, so it will be 60,000 into 10, that is 6 lakh. Value of rent paid in last month. So value of rent paid will be the last rental amount paid to the landlord, which is 60,000. Amount paid or credited, that is the amount of rent on which TDS needs to be deducted, again which is 6 lakh. Rate will be 5% and then the amount of TDS will be here. Again a warning about the higher deduction if the landlord PAN is inoperative. Then the date of payment of rent and date of TDS deduction of rent. The total TDS amount is auto-populated. Interest, late fees, if any, will be applicable, and then you need to click on continue. After clicking on continue, again the same as form 26QB, you need to go for payment and make the payments accordingly. Now coming to form 26QD. Under 26QD, so when we come to this form under new payment, the first step is to enter the new payment of the deductee. Deductee is a resident or non-resident, that is asked on every page. Other than that, as a deductor, all your details will be auto-populated. So there is no chances of more than one deductor, so that option is not available over here. You need to click on continue. Then you need to enter the deductee same way. The PAN of the deductee, Aadhaar number will be auto-populated. Then you enter the address of the deductee. Then click on continue. After clicking on continue, it will ask you about the nature of payment. Now, what kind of payment it was, whether it was for a contract, whether it was for commission or brokerage 194H, or it was a professional service or work, that is 194J. Now, the date on which contract is entered and the actual amount of contract. Below that, it asks whether there is any lower deduction for the deductee if applicable. So, if the answer is yes, then the rate of TDS will be reduced, but if the answer is no, then the normal 5% rate will be applicable. This is the total amount paid from 1st of April till date of actual payment. So this amount needs to be entered here. The total amount to be paid, that is the actual amount for the contract, date of payment to the deductee and date of TDS deduction. You need to enter your TDS amount, interest and late fees, and then you have to make the payment accordingly. After clicking on continue, the payment process in every case remains the same. The next is the last form, which is 26QE. After in the new payment tab, you again get the 26QE form. In 26QE, This is a Challan come statement. Again, as a buyer details, your details will be auto-populated. The seller, the deductee details need to be filled. Again, it's PAN. You need to re-enter the deductee PAN. Then Aadhaar number auto-populated. Address needs to be entered, and after entering all the basic details, you need to click on continue. Now you need to enter the deduction or the transaction details. First of all, you need to select whether the deductee or seller is a resident or a non-resident. After that, the date of the transfer date of your virtual digital asset. So when the transfer was conducted of that VDA and what was the value of that consideration of transfer. After clicking that or after entering those values, it will ask whether the payment was made in kind or in exchange of another VDA. So if it was a barter exchange system, if the answer is yes, then you need to enter the Challan details of that relevant transaction. And when you click on add, those Challan details get added, and then you get the Challan come return statement, which needs to be e-verified as per your normal e-verification process. But if it is not a transaction in kind or in exchange of another VDA, then you need to enter your date of payment credit, enter your TDS rate, which is 1% TDS amount, and the date on which the TDS was deducted. After these details, TDS amount is auto-populated, interest, late fees if any will be applicable, and then you go on continue and make the payment accordingly. So that's all for the today's video. You can just come to my website if you want to continue for any of the practical training courses, and you can know more about the practical training classes which is available offline as well as online. That's all for today's video. Thank you very much.